There is nothing connected with the staging of a motion picture that a woman cannot do as easily as a man. And there is no reason she cannot master every technicality of the art. In the arts of acting, painting, music, and literature, women have long held their place among the most successful workers. And when it is considered how vitally these arts enter into the production of motion pictures, one wonders why the names of scores of women are not found among the most successful creators of photodrama offerings. These are the words of Alice Guy. And this is our New Year's retrospective.
Yes, it is.
Welcome, B-Siders.
Welcome.
Our New Year's retrospective. This is Danny.
And this is Jim. And we are ending the year with a monumentally important individual.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's some things to talk about. So we are going to talk about Alice Guy-Blache.
Yes.
And we will be referring to her as Alice Guy from this point forward.
Yes.
Alice Guy did get married and hyphenated her name. But we are not going to promote the name Blaché because, as we will discuss later, it really just belongs to a really small, dickish individual.
It is not an important name.
No.
We want to put focus on Alice Guy.
Yeah.
You know, herself.
She is not a wife. She is a magical woman.
Powerhouse.
Yes.
But before we jump into that,
yeah,
a couple of things.
Let's talk about what's been going on.
Yeah. Well, I do want to take a moment to commemorate and, you know, recognize the passing of Anne Rice, Queen of Horror. And even if you haven't read her books, you have experienced her work through film, which
yes.
So if you don't know Anne Rice, she wrote Interview with the Vampire, Queen of the Damned, and many, many other.
The Vampire Lestat.
Yeah.
Vampire Armand. Just so it.
There were the like she redefined for horror, vampires, witches, werewolves.
Yeah.
I like to think that Anne Rice kind of brought in the era of like sexy horror.
Well, she did. The vampires that she gave us were classic.
They were classic and they were interesting.
Well, there was no modernization. There was no fucking hook. You know, just she showed that you can take a classic horror monster creature, right? And you can give it life. And we have talked so much about, we make that joke about, you know, The Office, you know, how many vampires am I supposed to care about? You know, Stanley at the Halloween party. And it rang true, you know, because we had True Blood.
Yeah.
It was a whole separate take. We've had all these, you know, Vampire Chronicles, and we've got, I don't know how many on Netflix and everything else. We have not been fans.
Yeah, not of the new
stuff.
The new era of vampires.
Yeah, and I couldn't even tell you what's going on. I gave up reading vampire books way early on.
Yeah.
And somebody insisted, Anne Rice, you know, see it, or read it. No, thank you. And then I saw Interview with the Vampire. And I thought, well, this is all right. But what's this book about?
And the book's so much better. I mean,
better.
The movie's phenomenal.
Well, that's just it. Yeah. I'm like, okay, I'm sold. I want to see, you know, that whole curiosity thing. Is it different? How different?
Yeah.
You know, I haven't read all of the books because, like, Magnus, I didn't read.
Oh, sure. I read, oh gosh, I don't even remember the order of them anymore, but I read most of them up until like the mid 2000s.
Right. I did Interview with the Vampire, Lestat, and Armand.
Yeah.
And then I, you know, life went different directions. I thoroughly enjoyed all of them. I got to say, my favorite was Armand.
Yeah.
Because in the movie, he was the most fascinating person on the screen in terms of a vampire.
Oh, yeah.
And he got so little play because he wasn't the story in that tale. And even in the book, Interview with the Vampire, it's not about him. That's why he had his own book.
Yeah.
She redefined a genre.
She absolutely did.
I don't want to say redefined. She solidified a genre because like we just said, all these loose things.
Well,
right?
Yeah.
These different ideas, and vampires have to be like this. I mean, you have to put them in the daylight, and then they have to wear magic rings, and just,
Well, I think, in a way, it's because of Anne Rice that these new vampires kind of exist, because what she did for the vampire genre was she made them, I mean, they're still monsters in her books.
Oh, absolutely.
But she made them into people also, right? Well, she humanized them.
Yeah, they brought with them who they were.
Yeah.
To a point. I mean, Louis, clearly, right? He brought a lot of himself with him.
Yeah.
Lestat, spoiled little shit. You felt bad for him in his story. You learned that, wow, this poor motherfucker was turned and left to,
But I mean, up until her writing about vampires, what we had was Dracula, and we had other stories where like John Carpenter's movies where vampires were just, blood crazed monsters,
right,
with no real thought behind them, and then Anne Rice came along and she wrote about them as people, and then we got awesome things like Buffy, and
I mean, yeah, there were some cool things that came out. What I liked about her view of the world she envisioned her vampires in was that, like you said, they were sexy. And that's the whole thing about vampires. If you think back to Bela Lugosi as Dracula.
I had a teen girl crush on Lestat. like nobody's business.
A lot of people didn't like Dracula because for back then, they did think it was a little too hubba hubba.
Oh, yeah.
It was, and I mean, there's nothing overtly sexual about it. But it was just the draw, the romanticism that they wove into it a little bit. And you think, well, the hell could a 1930s Dracula movie do? Did a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And Anne saw that.
Oh, yeah.
And gave us not just sexy vampires, like in True Blood, where everybody's running around mounting everything that moves,
right.
dead or alive. Right? She gave us a whole she did a whole world building thing.
Yeah.
There was a past, there was a history, there were rules, rituals. And, it's that whole thing, Interview with the Vampire. And, if you've seen the movie, Brad Pitt has that, bit where someone wants, when,
the writer?
No, God, my God, I can't remember the little girl's name.
Oh, Claudia.
I was going to say Lydia, and I'm like, that's not right. Anyway,
played
so
by
when
Kirsten Dunst.
Yeah, when Claudia brought her friend and wanted him to make her into a playmate, and he goes into that whole thing, do you find us alluring, are you taken by our transparent or translucent skin and this and that, and anybody else, yes,
yeah.
I mean, these are the vampires I grew up with. And then as an adult, I loved being reintroduced to a solid vampire mythology.
Yeah.
That wasn't rigged with stuff, So it's a shame. It's a terrible loss, in the creative world. Well, just outright. But, there could have been some more things there.
Yeah. I even read her other stuff about the Talamasca and the witches and
right.
I can't remember what they were called, but she had a whole series about these like strange beings that were not quite human. It was weird, but they were cool. Very cool.
Well, by the time this comes out, it'll be 2 weeks past her passing. So if for some reason you didn't know, now you do.
Yeah.
And, as you approach the end of the year, I mean, it's kind of why we're doing this retrospective. God damn it, did it twice.
Well, and if you've never read her books, go read them.
Yeah, do yourself a favor, because this will be
Start with
out
Interview with a Vampire.
Yeah, spend your last week of the year diving into it. Because as a creative, no matter what you're doing, scriptwriter, director, actor, she was a powerhouse writer. And that is why these books were so successful. Forget that she took a genre and nailed it, right? And locked it in, as there's no, fluffy, foofy shit about this. This is the real deal. Every word she put on that paper brought you into what was going on. There wasn't one part in any book where I felt like I had to click my imagination into overdrive to figure out how it looked, how it felt, how it smelled, right?
Oh, yeah.
She was point on. And we were talking about this at D&D night. I'm not going to mention the series, but there's a series of books that I did not care for.
Oh, sure.
And we talk about sci-fi writers, how so many, especially the old ones. I mean, let's face it, right? Asimov, especially. Not a visual dude. Does not make you put the book down.
So dry.
Yeah. Wrapped up in, 4K pictures in your head. Let's just say that.
Right.
But it was what it was, right? And that's what sci-fi people like me came to expect. Just the facts.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, there was a certain shift when sci-fi went from feeling like a textbook to feeling like this lush, immersive world.
People evolved the genre, and that, and as they should. But, the masters were dry. I mean, even Conan, right? Robert E. Howard. I loved Conan, but it was the same kind of thing, just the facts, right? Conan, big, strong, fight with sword, Not a lot of pages just bringing you the world. Anne gave that to us. She was a magnificent writer. And if you read her books, even if you aren't into vampires, if you cannot get some sort of inspiration for creativity, for bettering what you do and how you present something, how you write something, or as a director, how you frame something, she delivered. And I'm envious. It's one of those things you aren't supposed to envy. I think you can. I think you can look at someone who's a true master and go, I'm going to be honest with myself. That is not my throne. I will not reach that, but I'm not going to sell myself short.
Oh,
right?
She inspired an entire generation of writers and creatives.
Well, and for everything, but, not the smallest part, a woman.
Yeah.
We know how even still today, but the struggle of women creatives, right? Anne Rice, bam, put everybody in their place, sat everybody in their seat, schooled them time and time and time again.
I actually remember, I know we're trying to move on, but I remember.
Oh no, this is what it's about.
Anne Rice for a long period of time had also written a great number of erotica novels, and she had written them under a pseudonym because she didn't know what it would do to her, reputation if they connected her, She
didn't want to tarnish the brand.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there was a point, and I remember it being a big deal when she was like, fuck it. Guess what?
Yep.
And slapped her name on all of them.
She pulled the Stephen King.
Yeah.
Stephen King did the same thing. And one day decided, I did this. Maybe people should know.
Everyone knew prior to that it was her writing it, but it was the pseudonym, right?
Right. But, if it's not on the book, it's not on the
Right.
paper, you can't hold it to it.
Yeah.
But, that's, it's unfortunate that we have to say goodbye to her.
Yeah.
But it's I can't help but think, she wasn't a filmmaker, but I can't help but think because we're doing Elise for our retrospective.
Right.
Talking about Anne a little bit, I don't think Elise would be like, don't steal my thunder.
Oh, I don't think so.
Because these are two hugely important people in the creative world in their various areas. So, yeah. Let's see what else has been going on. I don't think we
got boosted.
Oh yeah, we got boosted. We're recording a day late because man.
Woo!
Yep, we got it on Saturday. Did a whole night of D&D. Arms started feeling sore, and then Sunday, man, I could barely make it to the grocery store. I was so tired.
Yeah,
and so worn down. You barely made it through the house stuff.
I know.
In fact, you took a nap.
I did.
See, and it was weird because I wanted to take a nap and I couldn't fall asleep. And then all last night, I kept waking up like every 20, 25 minutes. I'm like, I was getting furious because I'm so tired. Why am I not sleeping?
Yeah.
I wasn't rolling on my sore arm or anything. It was just like, whoop, I'm up. What time is it? Motherfuck. Fine. All right. Let's try this again. Let's see. Little thing I want to mention.
Yeah.
The Midge has decided to branch out.
Oh, yeah. Her
music appreciation. And I find it funny because I spent so much time. She has commandeered my guitar.
Yes. And she did this herself.
Yeah. She just
took it,
went in and got it, tuned it, and started fidgeting with it, and then asked if she could mess with it. It's not a fancy guitar.
No, it's a pretty plain.
Yeah, it's I don't even remember his name's on the inside. It was Home Shopping Network. That's how fucking old this guitar is. 20 years old. It's like $135. The case is beautiful though.
It is a nice case.
I think that case is $135, and the guitar was just added in. It is hard to keep tuned after a while, but anyway, I mean, it's not bad.
No,
and I got it to learn. And I figured if I got good, I'd buy a real guitar. I never learned, but at one point she wanted to play guitar, so we got her a little 3/4 guitar or half guitar, and I sat with her. I don't know how many nights. Watching those videos, teaching her chords to the point where we were getting calluses on our fingers, and then she bailed.
Yeah.
And then the whole long while later, I want to play guitar. So we tried it again, and then she bailed. So after 20 years, that guitar is finally getting used.
It is.
And she is quick.
She is quick. She's picked up very fast. She's banging out tunes on it already.
Yeah. So.
And it's only been 4 days.
Yeah. So, that's proud papa kind of thing.
Yeah.
I love when she does stuff on her own. It's just so much fun.
I think that playing violin has kind of helped her in that,
Well, yeah. And she's appreciating music from the other side, the creative side, not just listening to it, but I could do this. I can play the guitar. She knocked that recorder out. The first instrument we all get our hands on through elementary school. I mean, she took that as far as they could go with it, and then she just kept going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have this thing. It's not a big apartment. It's not like I have to walk 100 yards, but I love calling her with FaceTime when she's in her room because it just annoys the hell out of her.
Oh yeah, she gets so furious.
So I called her to see if she was going to come out and hang with us, and she had the guitar on and everything, and she played it for me over the phone because it was just easier.
Yeah.
Than hauling it all out. But yeah. Well, I think that's it for our news. Yeah, let's start talking about this beyond amazing woman that up until a little while ago we never heard of.
Yeah.
And we come to find out most people have not.
Yeah. So Elise Guy-Blaché, who again,
don't use that name.
Okay, Elise Guy.
Yeah.
Was born in France. She was born July 1st, 1873 in Saint-Mond-Seine. She died March 24th, 1968 in Wayne, New Jersey. She had a very interesting childhood. We're not going to go through all of that, but she bounced around a lot.
Right.
But principally grew up in France. And Elise was the world's first female filmmaker.
Mm-hmm. There you go, folks.
The first.
Let that soak in. Yes.
I just want to give that a minute, right?
Well, so let me just preface this with, I might get a little emotional. Well, here's the thing. So you stumbled upon all of this, and we ended up watching a documentary that we'll talk about a little later about her.
Yeah.
And watching this story of this woman, it got me emotional.
Oh yeah.
And thinking about talking about her tonight and everything. There's just a lot of reasons behind it. You know,
yeah.
It's her story is a Hollywood movie.
It absolutely is.
It's, you know,
and I believe one should be coming out soonish, but
right.
when, I'm not sure.
Right. This, if it hits the screen, see it. I mean, there's betrayal, there's, you know, underhandedness. There's just all of these things that happen to like our favorite heroes.
Yeah.
You know, our fictional heroes. This is real life.
Yeah.
I mean, again, you can't make this shit up.
This woman led a life that I am just in awe of.
It's such beauty and such tragedy.
Yeah.
Like hand in hand.
Yeah. Like I'm getting a little watery just thinking about it.
Well, what brings this all home, folks, the documentary that we'll talk about, it actually has film of her being interviewed.
Yeah.
In the 60s, just, you know, a few years before her passing. And that adds a whole level.
It's very powerful.
Of wow, because you get to see her. It's not so much that you get to hear her, but it's just like real talking, and you just get to you see the woman.
Yeah.
Her personality, this whole thing that comes, you know, leaps and bounds beyond people describing it and talking about her and some voice clips. Anyway, you want to go ahead, continue?
Yeah. So, I mean, we have notes. They're in like no real particular order. They're sort of roughly chronological, but mostly kind of like sectioned on different things. So, Elise Guy was a writer. She was a director. She was a producer. She was a pioneer in filmmaking right from the start.
Well, let us not forget, she was also a studio creator.
Yes.
We'll talk about that too.
Yeah. So if you look up Elise Guy on IMDb, you will find that she has 454 directing credits. 454. 32 producer credits, 18 writer credits. However, we know that she wrote and directed hundreds, if not like thousands, of short films for the company Gaumont when they first debuted their film camera for mass production. They were originally a camera production company in France, and they purchased the film camera patent from the Lumiere brothers. And if you know anything about film history, you know that the Lumiere brothers were the first people to make a commercially producible film camera that could project film.
Yeah, the first reliable projection system.
Right. And she worked as a secretary for the president of Gaumont at that time. And actually, when they first had the film production camera, she was there at the first screening of the Lumiere's projected film, the first time they ever showed a film being projected.
Right.
Which was workers leaving the Lumiere factory. It was a not even 10 seconds of film of just people walking out of their factory. And that was kind of what film was for a long time.
Right. Yeah. Folks, if you have ever looked back at the first films that were created by a number of people, say in this 10-year period, right? When it first came out, and then like for the 10 years, 90% of what was made was stock footage.
Yeah.
It's just someone set a camera up in, busy streets in San Francisco or Chicago.
Someone crossing a bridge, waves crashing on a beach.
Yeah, boats on a boat on a dock.
Right.
Right. Literally just like someone walking around with their iPhone.
Hot air balloons landing.
Yep. Taking, 1 minute clips of just random shit.
Right.
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 And, the novelty of the moving picture is what sold everything.
Yes.
But
that wasn't going to last forever.
No.
Right.
Well, so Elise, very young, she looked at, and by her words, she thought this is something.
Yeah.
This is not like the Paris Science Fair where there's thousands of inventions and only 2 ever go on to become useful, right? She knew there was something to this, but she couldn't understand, why are we just watching random things happen?
Right.
She knew stories could be told.
Yeah.
Narratives. And
she took it upon herself.
Yeah, she took it upon herself. This is what makes her just, there aren't even words. There aren't enough words to attribute to her.
Well, when she started working for Gaumont, she knew nothing about photography, film, developing film.
No, she was a secretary because she was told to take a stenography class because that was the only way she was going to survive in the world.
Well, that was how to get a high-class job as a woman.
Yeah, right?
Right.
That's what I'm saying. But
upper middle class.
So she decided that we should be telling stories, and she took it on.
Yeah, she asked the president, "Can I Can I do stuff with this? Can I make some films?" And he was like, "As long as it doesn't interfere with your regular shit you're supposed to do."
Yeah. So she essentially taught herself. And in that, let's credit the people who did know how to run the cameras and the things and stuff. You can't just accidentally find out everything on your own. There were people who guided her, showed her. I mean, that's how we learned. But the point is, she did it herself, right? Nobody was commanded to help her. And she worked out filmmaking. All the basics that everybody was doing. And everybody was only ever doing basics. Like I said, it was stock footage, right?
Yeah.
And this is one of the things about her is she put first of all, there were scripts.
Right.
Right?
She put together scripts.
That's important for a story. Now, we did get to see a few snippets of those.
Yeah.
In the documentary when they were going through documents and stuff. I haven't actually looked one up. Folks, they're way different than we write scripts today.
Well, but they are also sort of remarkably similar. You know what I mean?
Well, they're actually the reverse of what they are today. There's almost no dialogue because that was superfluous.
That's true.
Right? She understood there's no sound to this shit. So I need to tell a story by showing a story. So it actually reminded me of Ryan Kruger when he's just like, I just get paragraphs of stuff and then make things happen. That's really what they were. If you handed someone a script today that looked like that, where it's like an action header and it's 4 pages long, they're going to throw it in the bin.
Yeah.
Right? We want pages of dialogue, bits of action in between pages, a few here, a few there. But this is the whole thing. You had to write a script to specifically tell the story visually. So it was more, does this, does that, does the thing with the hands, goes over there, right? And it gives a narrative. And as with all these movies, a lot of the dialogue was just kind of, they'd wing it in some films. There'd be talk about this subject. Sometimes there were actual lines.
Right.
Right. But everyone pretty much knew at the time, it's not as important as visually telling the story.
Right.
And you should be able to do it without words because that is the medium. And she knocked that shit out. her first film that she's credited with was I got the French name, but I don't want it. The Cabbage Fairy.
Yeah. La Faire Chaud.
I'm not even going to pretend. I did poorly at French in middle school. So this is a short film, and it's just a fairy pulling babies out of the Cabbage Patch.
Mm-hmm.
And you watch this, it is, it has the look and feel of all the first, 2-minute clips, 1-minute clips, 30-second clips of cars and stuff. So you know what era this is from, but it's the first time someone could laugh at something.
Well,
you know what I mean?
What she did essentially was she created one of the first, if not the first, narrative film.
Right, because it wasn't just randomly doing it. There was actions.
Right.
And there was character involvement.
It was a cute little story about babies being born in a cabbage patch.
Right. And notably, the first one of, if not the first set.
Yes.
For a film. So filming a street, there's no set, right? You just put up a tripod and crank that sucker, tick, 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 and then go develop it. She created an environment for this. Yeah. And it's just crazy. This launched everything.
That's true.
And I don't say that patronizingly. I don't say that lightly. I honestly think if it were not for this woman, I don't think we would have an entertainment industry like we do today.
Right.
And we'll kind of get into the nooks and crannies of the various debacles that she had to deal with.
That's the absolutely wild thing. So our goal for this year is to focus more on female filmmakers.
Yes.
Right. And so what we wanted to do for our retrospective was focus on a female filmmaker. Well, there are a ton,
mm-hmm.
right, that you can choose from. And I was looking through lists of them and I came upon her. And when I started learning about her a little bit, I was like, why don't I know who she is? Why have I never heard of her before?
Right. Well,
what is going on?
We found out.
Yeah.
And it's stupefying.
It is.
So yeah, she did the Cabbage Fairy.
Mm-hmm.
It's the first or one of the first narrative. It's so hard to put dates, exact moments on some of this stuff. I would like to just go ahead and say she did the first.
Sure.
But I also don't want to, open it up to derision,
Right.
Well, according to this, because anyway.
Well, because in the pioneering days of filmmaking, there was a lot of stuff going on at the same time and just legal battles over various things.
Oh, Jesus, everything.
It was a mess.
Yeah.
And there's mess.
And it goes on further into her story too.
Yeah.
So anyway, she was knocking these things out, these stories. We've seen, we didn't write down the names of the ones we saw, but The Drunk Mattress is one of my favorite.
I love
we laughed so hard
mattress.
At that, The Drunken Mattress. There are, sadly, out of all these things that she has factually been credited with, I think IMDb said there are 77 films that exist in a viewable fashion. And not all of them are available online or different media. Collectors have them. We know from the documentary, a lot of them were dug up and brought out, and they're in restoration houses now.
Yeah. So the information that I had found was that she directed over 1,000 films.
Right.
That we know of. 22 of which are feature length. Only about 150 total currently survive in some form or another, whether it's partial or whole, in film archives and private collections around the world, and even fewer still are watchable. We were able to find about a dozen on YouTube.
Right.
And the only reason even these few are available is because of that documentary we watched, the 2018 documentary. It is called Be Natural, The Untold Story of Alice Guy-Blaché.
And we'll come back to that.
Yes.
In a little bit. We'll tie that in. The other thing these movies had wasn't just narrative.
Right.
Alice Guy was one of the first to introduce actual filmmaking techniques.
Yes.
And I'm not talking lens work.
No.
Right? She did close-ups, wide shots, cuts. If you remember, folks, a lot of these early things where there were people, it was one camera, everything happened like it was a play. Right?
Yes.
Everything had to happen in front of the camera and stuff. Well, she figured out if I walk over here and look at something, it's different than when I walk over here and look at something. Why aren't we doing this with a camera?
Yeah.
You know,
she did camera movement.
Yeah. Camera movement. She, hand coloring, special effects, double exposure, masking techniques, learned how to run a film backwards.
Synchronized sound.
Later, came up with synchronized sound system. That was amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. And I'm going to say most notably, she was one of the first to do interracial casting.
Yes.
This is turn of the century, folks.
Yes.
You cannot undersell how massively important that maneuver was.
Yeah. I mean, her first film was in 1896, right?
Yes.
So that gives you some time frame of what, right? And her career only lasted until 1920. She was only able to make films for about 24 years.
Right. And we'll describe why.
Yes.
When we get there. And lastly, I just want to say that because of her interracial casting, that ultimately blew up in her face and ended up a great success.
Yeah.
Because she made what is widely believed to be the first film to have an all African American cast.
Yes.
And not Bojangles, right?
No.
This is a real scripted, it was a story.
It is,
not buffoonery, not comedy.
No, I mean, I do think it does have some, it has some issues racially, but that's just because that's kind of how the world was at that time.
Yeah.
But the story is actually just about a guy who is poor and he comes into a lot of money and he's very irresponsible with his money.
Yeah, he gets money stupid. But I love the bit that when they show and they're talking about it, he his family treats him like shit, so he gets all this money, buys a fancy car, drives by the house, hey bitches, and then turns around and drives back. Hey again, and
then drives back again.
Yeah. Like what I got. So the reason that came about, it wasn't her intention to do an all African-American cast. It was biracial. It's supposed to be
right.
Caucasian and actually we can't say African-American because they were kind of from everywhere. They weren't American. All of them. But the white actors had a piss fit.
Yeah.
And said, no, it'll make a mockery of my career. And Alice Guy basically told them, fuck off, filled the rest of the roles with fellow African Americans and made her movie. Bam, bam, and bam. It doesn't matter that she didn't set out to do it. The fact that she was doing something that, basically riled the stomachs of racists. Let's just say it.
Yeah.
What it was. And refused to let anyone put a foot on her throat.
Oh, yeah.
Right? the ultimate, well, fuck you then, toodles.
Yeah.
This is how quick a career can end. Piss off.
Mm-hmm.
And did it. And people loved it.
Yeah. Oh,
Are you okay?
I'm so enamored with her. But let's go back a little bit. So, she was working at Gaumont, and there was a guy who worked for the London branch. So she worked in the Paris branch.
Right.
There was a guy who worked in the London branch who had come over and was going to head up their filming department in like Germany or something.
Right.
And they sent her to teach him about it. And this guy's name was Herbert Blaché.
Yes.
And he was an Englishman.
Yes.
Well, they ended up getting married in 1907.
Mm-hmm.
And then 3 years later, Herbert was appointed the production manager for Gaumont in their U.S. office. So they moved to the United States, to New Jersey.
Right.
Which, if you don't know about the beginning of filmmaking in the United States, New Jersey was where it was at.
Hollywood, California is literally Hollywood 2.0.
Yeah.
1.0 was in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And we're not talking like Chaplin Industries and stuff.
Right.
Paramount, Universal.
Yeah.
All
the big ones, they started in New Jersey.
All started in Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, kind of like it is in California. They didn't learn I love this. They didn't learn their lesson. So there's a whole section of Jersey, which is like studio lot, studio lot, studio lot, right? And there was espionage and this and sabotage and stuff. And so they go ahead, we'll get to it, but they end up, going all the way across the country and do the same fucking thing.
Yeah.
So whatever. Okay.
Yeah. So before Edison and the motion picture patent wars ended up forcing everyone to go to California to get away from Edison and his issues, everyone was in New Jersey.
Yep.
So Herbert eventually went to work for Universal. Elise couldn't find work in the United States, even though she had extensive experience at Gaumont, more than Herbert did.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
She was the production manager for the Paris branch in Paris. But when she got married, she could no longer have a job there because that's how things worked.
Right.
You can work until you get married and then you have to be a housewife. So what she did instead was she founded her own production company all by herself. It was called Solax. And you might recognize it if you have seen old Solax shorts.
Yes. On the title cards, right? So when the dialogue comes up, you also, I'm hoping by now, listeners, you've seen silent films. Because I know people who haven't, but if you've been listening to our show, we've been imploring you to watch them. So, action, 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 and then the words come up on the screen. Well, those are the title cards. And you can see on the bottom, the studio who made it and stuff. And I love watching the Solax ones because they're so neat and orderly.
Yes.
And very plain, like 139-2. So, this is the second card. 129-3. So this is the third card. And you just kind of like, I don't know, maybe it's because, my ACD order stuff. I just love it. But yeah. So, but let's say, and it was initially called a production company, but by today's standards, it was in fact Solax Studios.
Yes.
Yes. Because she didn't just fund films.
No, she produced them.
She wrote
and directed and managed an entire studio.
Yeah. Well, she designed this thing.
Yes.
A groundbreaking design.
Yes.
For a studio.
One that everyone ended up copying.
Yes, ultimately, yeah, everyone started copying it because basically they were just doing warehouses and then shit shoved in a corner and like a prop room. Hers had multiple stories, and here was the studio, and then they had them where they could be built and lowered and swapped. I mean, Jesus Christ, if there was ever a checklist of what would you have to do to build a studio to be called like on the ball, I mean, she made that look like confetti. You know, she was there. One of the most notable things about this studio was she had, I think letters were 2 feet high or 3 feet, 4 feet high.
I don't remember.
I think there were 4 feet high letters that she had this big sign.
Huge sign.
Says, be natural.
Yes.
And that was her advice to the actors. Her advice to actors was just be natural. We're not going for any kind of performance other than what the script says is going on. You don't need to burden yourself. You don't need to get locked up. You don't need that pressure. Just be natural. And let's tell a story.
I mean, at the same time as she was doing this, there were other films being made.
Right.
And a lot of the films around the same time, if you watch them, you will notice that the actors they're bigging it up. Right.
Yes.
They make huge gestures. They make like overly, emotional faces. Because there isn't sound.
Right. But think forward a little bit. Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah.
Okay. So when that era hit, everything, big flourishing movements, the jokes were make big. And that was a phrase in Hollywood for acting for a long time.
Yeah.
Make it big, Yeah. Elise was like, nobody acts like that.
Well, that's not,
that's not, I don't walk through the streets flourishing and all this.
She wanted her stories to feel real.
Yeah. And that's what makes what we were able to see. There was such a pleasure to watch because it was, it's not even subtle. It feels subtle because we've been conditioned with these big things, but you just watch it and you're like, so like the drunken mattress. Every like 20 seconds, you're like, so much has just happened that, I'm going to want to watch this again.
Yeah. I would like to watch it again. I think Lily would enjoy watching it.
Oh yeah. She loves that goofy stuff. And it is goofy.
It is very goofy.
But let's come back a little bit.
Okay.
So she founded Solax Studio. And I just wanted to address this because we had talked about it. This is where what should have been, she should have held the strings to filmmaking in both hands as she ascended the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
She should have been the one. But here's the deal. So in France, I'm not saying that they were progressive because they were as misogynistic as they come.
Oh, yeah.
But France has historically been way more accepting of the arts.
Well, of female artists.
Well, just, but just in general. So, the whole arts and the whole creative process, they were all about it. Because on one hand, it was a fad, like the longest running fad in history.
Yes.
Right. It was proper. We talked about it with patrons in a past episode. This were the age of patrons. People like David Ryan Keith would be living in a cottage on somebody's land, getting all of his shit paid for as he pumped out his stuff.
Yes.
Not having to worry about bills. In France, the whole thing with art, it was very trendy to be a part of it. It was very trendy to support it. But it was also considered like the nerds and geeks and freaks, right?
Right.
They're doing their thing. It's this bohemian lifestyle.
Yes.
And it adds to our culture and we get to support it. And sometimes we get some cool stuff that
Bohemia is very sexy, isn't it?
Oh, it is. And because of that, the societal norms were cast aside.
Right.
Elise flourished because nobody gave a shit that she was a woman. She was an artist.
Yes.
And within that sphere, that's fine. Then she crossed the ocean.
Yes.
came to America, where arts have never, ever at any one point in, even today, any one point in history, ever had it good.
This is true.
We have had government and religious and societal squashing of everything creative, everything daring to be, the first nude. I mean, well, nudes for centuries, right? In Europe. All right, it's a nude. All the rich people.
Right.
See my nude? Right? Then, the reprobates come to America.
Well, weirdly,
and suddenly nudes are no good.
The reprobates and the Puritans.
Yeah.
Kind of a weird group.
I know. They come over and all this stuff was shit on.
Yeah.
And then a lot of it was because we were a new country. It's like, well, this isn't American art. This is somebody's filthy European ties to the old England. Da, 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 da. But on the other hand, we're not going to make any new fucking art.
I mean, I think I could write a thesis on the struggle of art in America.
Well, then, because of the art problem, right? So she lost her footing right there. But then when this all started happening, Hollywood 1.0 was being built. It was a business. And who was not allowed in or near business?
Oh, women.
Exactly. So it was like a double hammer that she couldn't have known. Nobody could have known. But that was two blows that changed the course of her life forever.
Yeah.
And not in a positive way.
Yeah. At Solax, Alice, I just like to give you an idea of how much she was cranking out. So this is, after Gawan, where she just cranked out films one after another, right? She would write, produce, and direct between 1 and 3 films per week.
Yep.
Right? And that's editing, because she did that too.
Yeah.
She literally did the cutting and, stitching together.
It's so
from
funny.
Start to finish.
It's what independent filmmakers do today.
Oh, yeah.
But she was running a studio.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what studio life was like. But the other studios had hundreds of people doing all these bits. And Elise, that quote at the beginning says it all. Fuck shit, and I do it.
Yeah.
I
do want to say at her studio, she did mentor and teach a lot of people who ended up going on to do great things.
Yes.
She mentored the first American female director. But I don't want to take attention away from Elise. So,
Well, yeah. Coming up to this point, because we left France.
Yes.
Elise was in every single, the Lumiere brothers, everybody who had anything to do with anything on filmmaking. She was in that circle.
Yes.
They adored her. They revered her. There's a thing the Lumiere brothers did of her just for her.
Oh, yeah.
And we should have wrote it down. It's a weird name. It's like one of the flip books that was found, right? And then then came to find out it was her.
Yeah.
Yeah. She was in close with these people, and not groupie kind of bullshit, or if where we can be like, oh well, we rub elbows with producers. Okay, well, technically maybe we do, but we don't go to their houses for dinner. We don't know these people, right? That's just on a business sense. That now through the show and the people that we do know, right? We have some good relationships.
Yeah,
cool. But she was in.
Yeah.
They were very dear to one another, these people in these circles. And Elise was very dear to a lot of these people.
She was. I mean, and not just film,
right?
But arts people in general. She was very good, and she was very good friends with, and some might even say, I mean, there are like rumors all over online about her relationship with Gustave Eiffel.
Yeah.
As in,
whatever.
Eiffel, as in Eiffel.
Yeah.
Right?
The man who gave us the Eiffel Tower for the World's Fair. Yeah. And it's not because it was a fad. And that's the thing that I wanted to bring this up and point out. Again, the fact that she was a woman didn't matter to any of these people. But the fact that, I mean, we're talking about filmmaking, but, let's talk about the things involved with that. She made sets.
Mm-hmm.
She figured out how to make shit on what you think indie filmmakers now have a shoestring budget. Right?
Right.
She just broke through. And it's not because, hey, that looks cool. It's because her entire being was an artist on so many different levels, in so many different ways. Anybody involved in art could not have not been enamored with her.
Yeah.
And impressed. And just, like I said, envious. It's okay to envy because, that's beyond me. But you know what? I'm going to get as close to that as I can because that is awesome. And I want to do honor to it.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, I think she knew from the start, and she was there from the actual start of filmmaking, like the literal beginning,
Mm-hmm.
right? And at the time of her death, she was the only surviving member of that generation.
I know.
Right? But she knew right away what film could become, what it would be.
Right.
And we watched several of her movies. We watched like 10 to 12 or so.
Yeah.
We didn't get a chance to get to all of them, but we did watch a good number.
Right.
The acting in those films and the way that she focused really on the characters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not so much the gimmicky, nonsense, right? They talk about it a little bit in the documentary Be Natural, but the Falling Leaves one, right?
Oh, yes.
So there's a film that she made about a girl whose older sister is dying of tuberculosis.
Right.
And the doctor says that she is going to die. It's in the autumn. The doctor says that she's going to die before the last leaf falls. So this girl's little sister is out in the garden tying strings to leaves and hanging them on the tree so that she can try and save her sister. And this is an old film, and I got choked up watching this little girl just desperately.
It was honestly, for the film of that age, it was the first one I've seen where a child was an actor.
Yeah.
And not just running around,
Right.
in the background or being a nuisance or something. It was really centered on a child.
Yeah.
Doing this, and the adult, everything about this by modern standards today. Anybody who's a filmmaker, you owe it to this woman, because anybody that taught you learned it from someone who learned it from someone who learned it from someone who learned it from her.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go ahead and say that. It is beautiful. The way she brought it together, how she presents these characters, and that girl. I mean, it is, it's heart wrenching because she doesn't just make shit up for a commercial level. Right. She meant every story she told.
And she didn't tell easy stories either.
No. There's layers. It's not just a narrative. She added layers.
Mm-hmm.
And she humanized these weird ghost-like figures being projected on a sheet.
Yeah.
For the rich. She gave us people. I can watch, I think of, Charlie Chaplin, Fatty Arbuckle. I can watch those movies. And I can't pick one character out from another, other than the cops have the ridiculously large hats and the big snidely whiplash mustache, and the giant top hat. But the way they're portrayed and how they act on screen, there's zero difference. right?
Yeah.
It's just a bunch of vanilla people with a funny guy who's slightly less vanilla because we see more of him.
Right.
Every one of these people, that whole be natural thing, that was the key, because
it was.
You feel like you're watching a modern day movie where a good director and writer and actors have all come together to put you in it.
Yeah.
And bring you in and just share that moment. You know?
Yeah. I mean, she does something, we're watching these, and I've never seen films from that time where any director spends so much time on just like a character's face and the emotions that they're going through.
Right.
Right?
Right.
A lot of films from that time feel rushed because they were rushed.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Well, if you think back to the first Lawrence of Arabia silent film,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now people are probably thinking, well, that had a lot of stuff. That was way after Elise.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. I just need to make that clear. Elise had done more than any of these other filmmakers after her had succeeded at doing.
Yeah.
Before she vanished. Well, she didn't vanish, but yeah, maybe we should let's get on to that.
Okay.
The tragedy part that explains why moving to America double tapped her into oblivion.
So the years, I would say probably 1916, 1917 to 1921 were particularly difficult for Elise.
Mm-hmm.
Her husband, Herbert, was having affairs. She had hired him at Solex because he ended up not being able to find jobs because he wasn't any good.
Nope. He was riding her skirt.
Yeah. And in fact, he had an affair with an American actress that Alice had initially hired for Solex, who went on to become a pretty big deal. But she and Herbert separated in 1918. There had been a fire that destroyed one of Solex's buildings and then compounded a lot of money problems for the production company.
Yeah.
So she ended up directing her last film in 1919, and Solex went bankrupt in 1921. Okay.
So quick history, because seeing my daughter trudge through the public education system. This is important because in 1917, World War I began.
Yes.
This fucked up a lot of stuff for a lot of people and economies and everything. So 1918, 1919 were especially bad.
Yeah.
Because we had all this going on too.
She tried to make film. She moved back to Paris. She tried to get back in with her Parisian group of, creatives and stuff, but she never made another film because at that time, film was becoming a money maker, right? Up until this point, film had been an art. It had been, kind of this like fringe thing that was entertainment, that was,
the existence,
it was a sideshow.
Yeah, the existence of it itself, the bohemian life and the product of this bohemian life.
La vie bohème.
Yeah, that was the entertainment as well.
Yes. But Wall Street was learning that film could make money. And it was drawing investors into its folds. And it was becoming a business. And like any business, as money comes in, the women get pushed out.
Yeah.
Elise included. So this is where I get really, really furious.
Yeah. You can do it.
She was intentionally written out of film history. Maliciously and intentionally. The production company Solex that she founded, when people started talking about the beginning of film and the history of film, they credited Solex to her useless appendage of an ex-husband, Herbert Blaché.
Yep.
Her thousands of films at Gaumont were credited to the male directors that she mentored.
Yeah.
At Gaumont.
That she taught.
That she
how
taught.
To do it. Yep.
And when people were talking about the first female director, like by the time they got around to going, oh, who is the first female director? It was handed to the American actress who ended up being a director who Alice initially hired at Selects.
Yeah. What made matters more difficult was the advent of World War II.
Yes.
During World War II is when they suspect the biggest portion of her films were destroyed.
Yeah.
Maybe, we know the Germans destroyed everything.
And she had none of them to prove that she had done them. She didn't have the reels.
No. And that's the thing too. People may have spirited the stuff away, but nobody who was involved with film, unless they were actually like the film guy who dealt with the medium,
right,
really understood how easy it is to destroy this stuff trying to save it. We're talking like they didn't worry about humidity. They didn't worry about conditions. This stuff rotted and some of it burned.
Well,
because they weren't careful.
The material of the first films before they got to gelatin film, cellulose, before they got to cellulose film, it was silver nitrate.
Yes.
Which is dangerously combustible.
Extremely. But here's the thing. Silver nitrate, I mean, they talk about it in the documentary, but as a photographer, as what I learned, it was magic.
Oh, yeah, it's great.
Silver nitrate gives you a look on film that nothing else has since been able to do without a filter and stuff. Well, eventually they figured out how to go to silver oxide.
Yeah. So
silver nitrate wouldn't kill you, or would no longer kill you because it was now silver oxide. It had that same, you could get that ethereal feel of stuff. But then they went to cellulose because or celluloid because cellulose. Sell something.
Celluloid. I think celluloid is right. But silver nitrate is so dangerously combustible that it will continue burning even if you throw it in water.
Yes.
At a very high temperature.
Well, and in certain extreme combinations of temperature going from one to the next to the next, they kind of implode.
Yeah.
I mean, this is sort of like filmmaker, historian's nightmare is all the images of opening a canister and just watching powder fall out. Because, it's like, oh, God.
And there was no IMDb when they were trying to figure out, okay, who made what films? What they had to do is they had to go to companies like Gaumont and be like, okay, who was working for you at the time? Who was your director at the time? That these films came out. Okay, well, I guess that it was this person. But she was actually written out of Gaumont's employment registry.
Yeah.
Completely.
She was written out of everything. So Alice Guy spent the last half of her life, a little more than
real hot.
I know. Spent more than the last half of her life being taken care of by her daughter because she couldn't get work. She couldn't. And so she just traveled with her daughter because her daughter had jobs at embassies and things. And she moved around a lot and she took care of her mom.
Yeah.
Right. Cause dickhead, right. Herbert fucked off with like all the credits and stuff and
he started his own production company later.
Yeah.
Guy-Blache, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Smear of shit, whatever it was. His 15 minutes of fame, which didn't last for 15 minutes. Anyway, she had been deliberately written out.
Yeah.
Of archives, of rosters, like you said, payroll, employee rosters, everything. Then film historians, most notably, every fucking single one of them a man.
Yep.
A misogynistic man.
Yep.
Right? Chauvinistic dick. They entered the picture and deliberately knocked her out of the running for her place in history.
Yeah.
Right. And, somebody, but based on
literally erased her.
Yeah. They wouldn't even fucking consider her. One of the most heartbreaking things about watching the documentary was they have her on film talking about her memoirs.
Yeah.
This really upset me.
Yeah.
Because they're like, well, are you going to publish them? She goes, I've tried.
Nobody will publish them.
Nobody cares.
Well, nobody will publish them because what she writes in there directly contradicts a lot of things that film, like men.
Yeah. Nobody cares about the truth.
No.
It was
heartbreaking.
It was heartbreaking. It's one thing to read about this happening to somebody, but to see them talking about it, and this was it was 63, 64 or 64, 65? I think it was. It doesn't matter. Somewhere between 63 and 65 is when this taped interview, filmed interview was done. And
she had written her memoirs in the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
So she'd been trying to get them published for years. She spent her whole life, like actually contacting up these people saying, actually, I did that movie. It wasn't such and such. Like she was, step by step trying to correct things. She was trying to correct all the errors that were made, and she was doing it in, I feel like, a nice way. Like, hey.
She was a lady.
Yes.
Let's just say that. And I don't mean
she was a woman of class.
She was. She had class, sophistication, manners. She had culture. She,
I'm crying.
I know. I'm getting all watery too, because it's just such a travesty that this could have happened. And I mean, it did happen. And it's almost unfathomable, right?
Yeah.
If there are so many people who would argue, if we wrote a story like this, I know a handful of producers would be like, "This, I can't go anywhere with this. This is not even remotely believable. This is just like too wild."
Yeah.
Right. Elise Guy gave us what we have today. If you're a screenwriter, you owe her. If you're a director, you owe her. If you make stage props, build stages, if you have anything to do with filmmaking, you owe this woman. And you owe it to yourself, because they did finally, because of her daughter's endless efforts.
Yeah. And her daughter's name is Simone Blaché.
Yeah. She got her mother's memoirs published posthumously in 1976. You know what? You don't even have to get like on a bandwagon. You just need to learn about this woman and be thankful that she existed.
Yeah.
And I think this is a calling card to everyone, right? We're trying to get equality in film, right? We're trying to get representation and stuff. You know what? It's already been done, and we fucking shit on it.
Yeah.
As a global society, we buried it. So my thing, and I don't mean to sound angry with this, but you know what? Let's stop trying to be all inclusive and, stop using the fucking word woke. I hate that fucking word. How about we look back and see what this woman did? And instead of trying to reinvent the fucking wheel, why don't we just pick up her banner and move forward? Because she did it all. She was a woman who put women and men where they should be.
Yeah.
Right.
She tackled societal issues in her films. Like, she didn't shy away from stuff that might upset people,
Infidelity.
Yeah.
She did like the first fucking movie about infidelity.
Infidelity, male, female, like societal roles.
She swapped them. Oh God. She did garner some hatred from the straight-laced people. They thought her shit was almost borderline like, pornographic.
Yes.
And hedonistic. Because, she had no problem swapping gender roles. And I don't mean like cross-dressing like Charlie Chaplin in a dress, pretending to be a maid or whatever. She had women in dresses, men in suits. They're normal, everyday things. But she had
men doing the stuff that women would typically do.
Yes.
And women doing the stuff that men would typically do.
Yes.
And Sergey Eisenstein, who was another, kind of pioneer in feature filmmaking.
Yes.
He didn't know the name of the film, but he had seen that film of hers as a young man.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like one that had changed his trajectory. Like, that was what inspired him to start doing film.
He mentioned her name as an influence.
Yeah.
And obviously this is, not during the big revival. He just brought her up. Most notably for folks here in the slightly modern era, Alfred Hitchcock
mentioned her,
openly credited her as a huge influence.
Yes.
Jesus Christ. How does this happen? We know how it happens, and it's our job to make sure it never happens again. Which is why we're doing 2022 as many female everything and anything we can put out there for films, be in independent films.
At the time of Elise's death, she had been trying very hard to find her films. She had no rights to any of the films that she had made. She had to write lists from memory in the hopes of getting creative ownership and credit for her work.
Yes.
And at the time of her death, she had only been able to locate, I think it was 2 or 3 films and a portion of another film.
Yeah.
And that was it. And she couldn't even get those because the people who had them would not give them to her.
Well, yeah, because at that time, I mean, none of this was, it wasn't like a movement. It wasn't fashionable. Most people were like, who are you nosing about shit? and they had this thing and they didn't really care what was going on. Right.
Yeah.
So I want to encourage everybody to see this documentary, Be Natural, the untold story of Elise Guy-Blaché. It's narrated by Jodie Foster.
Mm-hmm.
This was done by Pamela B. Green. She directed it, and it really, really gives you a huge insight.
Yeah, it is. It is like well done, and it's very informative.
Mm-hmm.
This documentary. I think your only criticism of it was like some of the clips are very quick.
There's a technical aspect to it that was distracting, because things were going so, and it wasn't like just like a picture of something. It was headings and stuff. Yeah. And it wasn't because I'm dyslexic. It was like, it was, could have been tightened up a little bit. That aside though, this was
well researched.
Oh God, yes. And I'm not going to talk about it, but there are some beautiful moments in this documentary that have to do with her ancestors and extended family and people who never,
her descendants.
Never knew of her, who had relatives. I'll just say one thing. There's these older folks who their grandfather wasn't the great grandfather. It was their grandfather, because they were older.
Right.
Was a cameraman. And he kept all of this shit from his camera career. Come to find out, he worked with Elise and shot a number of her things. And this picture, they were wondering, who the fuck is this woman? She's clearly in Grandpa's house.
Well, because he referred to her in French as Aunt Alice.
Right. But they didn't
know French.
Yeah. Then they find out it's Elise Guy.
Yeah.
Sitting at their grandfather in their house, or their grandfather's house.
Yeah.
Like, all these years, we didn't really know who she was.
Right.
And then they found his name on a credit, and it went from there. It's a beautiful documentary about a beautiful soul. And, everyone needs to see this. If you want to give yourself credit as any kind of anything in this business, you need to see this.
Yeah. And I mean, learn about her, do your own research, right?
Yeah.
There's only so much we can cram into a podcast, right?
Yeah.
We had to glaze over a lot of things.
So yeah, see this documentary. I hope at one point we get to speak to Pamela.
I hope so also. I mean, I would be fascinated to do so.
Right. For a number of reasons, not just women in industry, but her ties to this. and just, this is like one of those holy grail moments,
Yeah.
you know. And it's funny because in the email I wrote to her, and I still feel this way. I'm embarrassed that we just stumbled on this.
Yeah.
I always will be. And you can explain it away however you want. I am mortally embarrassed that this giant in filmmaking,
yeah,
which gave us what we have today.
I mean, there were so many of things in her films that she made that were later like literally copied.
Right.
into other films.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about many times. There's only like 7 stories ever told.
Yeah.
And it's been thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And we're just redoing them different ways. But the art in which it was done, she created it.
Mm-hmm. And
we've been doing it since. And we credit people. And I was thinking about, I did a lot of thinking about this. I don't mind people getting credited for their creation, right? If it's a good movie, it's cinematically beautiful, right, and the actors are top notch and the director was like, bam, bam on it. By all means, kudos. They deserve it. And we deserve, to be moved by what they've created.
Yes.
However, it's become apparent to me the number of people who have been credited with, wild filmmaking techniques and stuff that you are quite literally 70 fucking years too late.
Yeah.
I
mean, the sophistication of the techniques has changed over time.
A little bit. Well, yeah, because, today you make a dolly rig.
Well, you can have cameras that can do all kinds of things the first cameras could not do.
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, the rigging, the dolly rig back then is like, plus you're hand cranking this thing, right? That's why they look the way they do.
Yeah.
Now it's like glass.
Yes.
Okay. That's technological advancement. But what has not advanced are her techniques. They are the same.
Yeah.
They're exactly the same. Doesn't matter what you do it with. And I loved in the documentary, 2 guys recreated one of her films. And
they tried to.
Well, they did the best they could. They got
the
close.
Earliest film camera they could find that was kind of like equivalent to what she would have used.
But boy, was that a stubborn chipmunk.
Oh, yeah.
One guy's
I can't imagine trying to work with one of those cameras.
That's what one guy said. He's like, I can't imagine working with this day after day after day for like they did. This thing is just so finicky.
Yeah.
I
don't know where they would have found film even.
Oh, I don't recall.
They would have probably had to have it specially made.
Oh, anyway, Elise Guy has left us with a lot. And I would love to say we're going to take up the mantle and help restore her to history. We're doing this bit and we're going to like bring it up and mention it to people. I'm not going to lie. It's not our wheelhouse to take up like the drive. But here's the thing, folks. There are drives out there.
Yeah.
So just a little bit of encouragement, a little bit of anything to help these people.
I like to think that we're doing a little bit. We're putting out this podcast right out into the world.
That's what I'm saying. We're doing this bit and listeners, maybe you can do your bit and share the episode or say, hey, you know what? Have you ever heard of Elise Guy? I guarantee you're going to hear no.
Right.
Educate them. At this point, really, all we can do for her is honor what she's done, and look through the injustices.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I said, when she came to America, that's when it began. She was a woman and she was in art and she was fucked forever.
I think
no getting out from under that.
If there is any one person in film history that I would want to have a portrait of hanging in our house somewhere, it is Elise Guy.
Absolutely. Folks, because here's the thing. Here's what really got me choked up. I'm fighting it back. If you've ever looked at someone and just see the who of who they are. It is this woman. And, it's one of those things where at first it's like, you see a picture and you can't help but think, oh, was it just that moment, the smile and, the posing? 'Cause that's,
Yeah.
but you look at it and you're like, God damn, I can see this woman in that woman's face.
Yeah, I can see her passion and,
Yeah.
like what makes her who she is.
And then they have her on film 60 years later.
Yeah.
Right? And but for the gray hair and some wrinkles, her face looks exactly the same as that 20-year-old woman who just fucking birthed filmmaking for the world. And you just see the class, what we talked about, the smile in her eyes constantly.
Yeah.
Her class, her dignity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything about her. It is incredible. That's one of the reasons you want to watch this, because I don't know how many other things are out there where they'll have film of her in these interviews.
Yeah.
In her older years. But, oh man, she is just, you can see it. You can just see everything in there. Like, yep. And that's what makes it more disheartening that she made the critical mistake of following her idiot husband to America. Because I honestly think if she'd have stayed in France, she would have prevailed. And Edison and all the dicks over here would have been laughable.
Yeah.
Laughable. But that's kind of the thing. Everybody left France to come to America.
Yeah.
Because it was like, oh, it's the new frontier for filmmaking. Anyway.
Well.
I hope, folks, you really take something away from this.
Yeah. I mean, I want to just, for, the purposes of us, just say thank you to Elise Guy. And thank you to Simone Blaché. And to Pamela Green.
Yes. For bringing it out.
Yeah. Because I'm so glad. I'm crying now, but I'm so glad that I learned about her, that I learned about this incredible woman. And I'm so inspired by her.
Yeah. For a number of reasons, listeners, I hope you will too. I hope you will listen to this and then see this, and hope you feel the same way watching that documentary. And hope you feel the same way about your work,
Yeah. And we're both crying like babies right
we
now.
Really are. This is terrible. This is bad radio.
I think we should with that.
So this is the week of New Year's Eve and New Year's Day.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Seriously, close out 2021 with this marvelous woman, and take her into 2022, with inspiration, and keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
We keep saying it, just keep doing what you're doing. If it real simple, if it didn't happen for you in 2021, keep fighting to make it happen in 2022.
Yeah.
That's all we can ever do as creatives. But, I think you'll be a little bit better for knowing her through this documentary and the information and her history and stuff. I think it will only make what you're doing even better.
Yeah.
And also be safe. Let's be mindful of one another.
Be natural.
Yep. You know what? That is, we have that plaque or sign. It's not really a plaque.
Yeah.
That says Imagine. I picked that up. Can't remember if it was like World Market or Pier 1. It was some ridiculous place. But I saw it and I'm like, I love that. I've had that with me for so long. It just says Imagine.
Yeah.
Big sign. We have it hanging in the living room right now. I think we should get one that says "Be natural."
I think so. And we should get a picture of Elise Guy.
Yeah, we'll work on that.
Yeah.
All right, B-siders. Thank you.
Yeah.
For bearing with us through 2021. And we're going to keep moving through 2022. And we have a website.
I don't want to go into all that for this one.
No, just lordsofmisrulproductions.com. Everything's there. Emails, email addresses, links. Click on them. Send us a note. You know what? I would love to hear from anybody who wants to share how they felt watching this documentary for the first time.
Yeah.
We would really like to commiserate with you. Share that experience.
Have maybe a cry fest.
Yeah. Oh my God. Oh, if we get Pamela on here, we might have to do it over like a week.
This is bad radio.
It is so much bad radio. Okay. On a happy note, you've just learned about a truly magnificent woman, and we're better for it. And we hope you are. And there's New Year coming, and we appreciate you, listeners. We truly do. Thank you. And with that, we will
catch you next week.
Get you next week for the 2022 episode of something.
All right.
All right. Take it easy, B-siders.
Bye.